Alright, hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be talking about control rigging. Um, I'm going to have a simple little character here. I'm calling it my little chicken character. What I'm going to do is, what you'll realize is that when we have our characters, um, when we have them on a ground or on the surface, it's really hard to get a feel for the controls or digging into the controls and trying to get something that works to grab the joints or those kind of things. If you wanted to grab, let's say if I wanted to go in here and grab particular joints of my character, that can be complicated and difficult to do. If I wanted to animate these arms or go in and try to grab, say, go in and try to grab the root joint or something like that. And so what we want to do is add control objects, objects that actually we actually select, that's outside of the skeleton, that allows us to control the bones or the things that we actually want to be animating. So that gives us a control object that's actually controlling the joints that we want. So for in this particular case, I want to create some control objects that I can select and grab on for the feet, because I'm going to end up hiding all of my bones and things, and I'm going to hide all that stuff so that I can have the least amount of things on screen as possible. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use non-renderable attributes or things that you won't that don't render, like NURBS curves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a NURBS curve. Now, I usually use just simple curves, not a piece of geometry, not a shape object. I use just a simple object that I'm going to constrain the IK handles to. And when I do that, it's going to give me the ability to only move my object in the way that I want. There's different kinds of constraints. If we're working in the animation menu set, there's a constraint drop-down menu, and there's a lot of different kinds of constraints. We're mostly interested in point and orient. Some of you have used the aim constraint with a light and a camera, and the parent constraint. Those are the ones we typically use. Now I am going to be using a simple NURBS circle, and I'm going to constrain the IK handles of my legs to that. So each one is going to have its own unique curve. And I'm going to also have one for the root, and a control object for the root and a control object for the head. And from there, I'm going to add custom controls that allow me to bend the antenna and control the antennas. My custom controls will show up over here in my channel box when I select my actual head control. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to get rid of this plane. I'm just going to hide it for now, Control H. And I'm going to begin by hiding my geometry. So I'm going to go to show, and I'm going to say hide polygon so I can see just the joints. I'm going to begin by going to create a NURBS circle, NURBS primitive circle, and I'm going to set the settings on my NURBS primitive circle to be a division of 8. I'm going to rotate that circle in X 90 degrees, and I'm going to snap it down to the location of my toe joint here, or where the IK handle is. So I'm going to use snap to point. I'm sorry. I'm going to go here. I'm going to hold down V to snap to point, and I'm going to snap it down to this location. Before I go much further, I'm going to bring up my ground plane. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go into my control vertices, and I'm going to grab my control. Actually, I'm going to just move this out of the way for a second. Go to my control vertex. I'm going to grab these here, and I'm going to scale them down so that they're flat like so, and I'm gonna move them up a little bit, and then I'm gonna go back to my object mode, F8. I'm going to move my insertion point down to this bottom point here, and then I'm going to snap that. I'm going to look at it from the side just to make sure I've got it actually in the spot that I want. And then I'm going to snap that to my point here. Basically, I just want this to be above the ground and be above the plane. So whenever I have my plane up, if I go to display, show last hidden, should have my my ground plane should come up. I'm going to make sure I snap it to the right leg, meaning the left leg. Looks like my camera's getting screwed up, so here we go. And so I have it in this location, and I'm going to show last hidden. My ground plane, I guess. Oh, it's because I have the polygons unchecked. So here we go. Okay. So essentially, I want that. I want this to be in a position where I can select it, and I'm going to use it to move my character's foot up and down. So I'm going to name this. I'm going to name this control object left foot control, and I always put capitals for my control so I know it's a control object. So I have that located here, and I'm going to modify and freeze transformations. So this position is basically going to be the 0, 0, 0 position for it. Alright, while I'm at it, I'm going to hide my geometry again, and I'm going to control duplicate that, and I'm going to move that over, and I'm going to snap that to my other foot, and I'm going to call that left or right foot control. And now I have a control for my left foot and my right foot. Okay, and it should be snapped in the position. Alright, now what I want to do is I'm going to simply constrain the IK handles to the control object. Now when we constrain something, we are going to actually select the constraining object first, then the object that is to be constrained, which would be my IK handle. And I'm going to go up to the constrain attributes. Now with the foot, the only thing I want to constrain is its position in space, the translation attribute. I don't want to rotate it in this particular case because all I'm going to be doing is positioning it. I don't need to scale it. I don't need to do anything other than maintain or constrain its translation values. And that's called a point constraint, meaning a point in space, an XYZ number in space. I'm going to go to the attribute editor. I'm going to hit reset settings, and I'm going to say apply. And when I do that, what I'm going to end up with is a object here. When I select it, notice that the leg object, I'm going to bring back my geometry, my leg is now being constrained to my control object. You can see this here. I'm going to go up. You can see my geometry now. So whenever I want to move that leg or put that leg in position, I'm simply going to control or grab that object, that control object itself. And I'll set keys on that control object, and that'll help me simply select the object here. So again, I'm going to do it over here. The object that I'm constraining, the object that is constraining is going to be selected first. Then I'm going to select my IK handle. Here I'm going to go up to constrain, and I'm going to say point. And when I do that, my object then is being used to constrain it. So now I can see, all I need to do is just use that to grab those joints, and I can place the foot exactly where I want it in my scene. Now I don't have to leave them this large. Oh, one thing that I didn't do is I didn't freeze transformations on this one over here. So I'm going to undo that because I want my zero. I want to be able to zero these things out. So I'm going to undo that here. Notice that these things become illuminated. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to freeze transformations, modify, freeze transformations, and select my IK handle, object constraint, go to point constraint. Okay, so I have, okay. Got a little lag on the computer because of the, oops, looks like I've got an issue here. Let me go back real quick. Make sure this one is working. That one's working fine. Let me, what's going on with this? Oh, I see. I didn't constrain it. Okay, so the two objects, this is here, this object is here. Make sure that it's in the right position. I want to make sure that it is, again, I'm going to hide my geometry, make sure that it's snapped to the right spot. V, snap it to joint. That is going to constrain this. And I'm going to go, I want to freeze transformations, modify, freeze transformations. Have that. Select my leg, my IK, go to constrain, and go to point. And now I have my point constraint, and that should run the leg just fine. Then when I go back to 0, I should be able to zero out my objects, putting their legs back where I want them. And we should be good to go on the legs there. Okay. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do is make a constraining object for my root and for my hips override. So I'm going to make another control object. So I'm going to say NURBS circle. I'm going to make my NURBS circle. I'm going to snap it up to my hips override joint. I'm going to use my constraint. I'm going to make sure that I have it in the right spot here. This is where I got to take my time to make sure I have it in the right location, which it can sometimes be hard to see, especially since I have my hips override in the exact same place as my root. So there's my root, and if I transverse up, there's my hips override. So this object is going to be what I grab when I want to control the head, or in this particular case the hips override. So I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. When I want to select the head, I just want to be able to select this ring here, and I want that to be basically controlling my hips override. So I'm going to keep it right there like that, and I might make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to freeze transformations on it. And I'm going to use my hypershade or my hypergraph hierarchy because it's kind of hard to see this. Here's my hips override. So I have this is going to actually control my hips override joint. So when I move that, I can move the hips override the hips. In this case, it's kind of like the head. And I'm going to use a different